Hey y'all, I just finished needle felting a color wheel jacket using wool roving, a pink needle felting tool by Clover, which holds 3 needle felting needles, and using this cushion underneath also by Clover. I thought I'd share with you my process of needle felting and specifically creating this jacket. So this jacket is not wool. That's a big misconception. When you're needle felting, you can needle felt on any fabric surface. I've needle felted on jersey, wool, and wool blends. Sweaters are my favorite because they're a little bit more porous. This had kind of a sweatshirt material. It wasn't the easiest thing to needle felt through, but once I kind of got the hang of it, it was not a problem. When I needle felt, I always draw my designs out in chalk first. I like using chalk because it's easy to go back and erase. So here you see me kind of sketching out my lines. A color wheel was really simple to do because it wasn't anything that was tough to draw. It was just a series of straight lines. And I had laid out my wool roving first so I could kind of know what order I wanted my colors to go in. I wanted it to be kind of a gradual or change of colors, so I used a lot of different colors of wool roving. Speaking of wool roving, the best place to purchase that is somewhere locally. If you're not familiar with where you could get that, then see if in your town there's a local fibers guild that can possibly put you in touch with somebody who cards and combs and dyes their own wool. If you can't find that kind of person like me, we don't really have anybody like that locally in my area. I use Sue Bunch from Back to Back Fiber. She has a great variety of colors, and she's also easy to access by email or phone. And also Natasha at Esther's Place, 2 of my favorite places to get wool roving. You can also get it at the craft store, but it's not necessarily as cheap. But if you want to just dive right in, that would be a good place. When you're needle felting, you don't need a ton of wool roving, unlike wet felting. So let me explain the process. What you see me doing is kind of like pulling the wool roving and then laying it out first. When you use roving, you never ever want to cut it with scissors. You always want to pull it out in tufts. So here I am getting ready to just kind of sketch out where I want my next color of roving to go. Again, I'm using chalk, working on a hard surface like my table. And after you've got it kind of drawn out where you want it to go, then you're going to pull the roving in tufts, almost like you're pulling off pieces of cotton candy. The reason you never want to cut it with scissors is because you want layers of the roving to kind of overlap. It's called shingling, and you don't want it to be a blunt line. You want to be able to overlap those fibers. So you'll see me here pulling it kind of in tufts, and then I'm going to start laying it out or shingling it onto the fabric where I want it to go. Less is actually more. You can always add more roving if after your needle felting it looks a little bit thin to you. If you put it on there very, very thickly, it's going to be tough for you to puncture with the needle. Just be a lot more work for you and also make the surface of what you're needle felting kind of lumpy and weird. So I'm kind of doing it thinly, and then I will be using that bristle brush that you see next to me. It's going to go underneath. That's my cushion that goes underneath the surface as I start to needle felt. You could use a block of foam. I like this bristle brush better than foam because I find that my needles, I don't break them as frequently. So once you've got it all laid out, then you're going to take that bristle brushy thing or your piece of foam, slide it underneath, and commence stabbing. When you're using your needle felting tool and you're stabbing, my needle felting tool holds 3 needles, so I get a lot more done than just holding one single needle. So here I am sliding it underneath and getting ready to stab. And you'll notice, watching out for my fingers, you'll notice that I'm holding my tool perfectly vertical. The moment that you angle it or try to twist it and angle it as you're stabbing, that's when you will break your needle. So you need to be extra careful with that. So I'm just making sure it's being perfectly vertical, going straight up and down. A question I get a lot is, how do I know if I've needle felted it enough? When you look at the back surface of whatever you're needle felting, it should be like a fuzzy, kind of chalky look, like a chalk version drawing of whatever you're needle felting. You should see a good amount of fibers from the front punctured through to the back. If you don't see your design, then that means you haven't needle felted it enough. You'll also want to, so right now, if you look at the surface of mine, you can see mine looks really lumpy. That's because I'm about to use my needle felting machine that'll further felt everything down. If I didn't have a needle felting machine, I wouldn't want to see any of those ripples or waves, because over time, as I'm wearing the jacket or somebody touches the back of it or it gets rubbed, that roving is going to come off. So if you don't have a needle felting machine, and I'm guessing most of us don't, then you'll need to really spend a lot more time puncturing the surface. Clover does make another needle felting tool. It's a little bit bigger. It holds more needles, which would be great for something like this. So I just filmed it from this point of view so you could see a little bit better what I'm doing with my hand, making sure that it's perfectly vertical. Once you're finished and you have needle felted the entire thing and you're pretty certain that everything is really well tacked down, what I always do is turn whatever I'm needle felting inside out and steam iron it. And the reason I do that is because it'll help make the surface of what you've needle felted nice and flat. It will also further felt it, because what causes things to felt is agitation and moisture, water. So that steam is going to further felt the fibers to your surface. Now, that being said, when it comes to washing anything that's been needle felted, unfortunately, you don't want to throw it in your washer, because what will happen is it'll really felt, and if your jacket or whatever you're needle felting on is not wool, it will not felt. So what will happen is you'll have a jacket where the back of it, in my case, would be all wrinkly and felted and shrunken down, whereas the rest of it would be normal looking because the rest of my jacket is not wool. So for that reason, unfortunately, you'd either need to dry clean only or wash by hand, which is what I usually do. So this is a needle felting machine. It is made by Simplicity. It is basically a sewing machine without any other bells and whistles, except that it holds a lot of needles, and that's it. That's all it does. It holds a lot of needles, and when I use it, I do not lower the feed dogs. If you lower the feed dogs, I notice it'll get hung up on the roving. So what I do is I leave the feed dogs up, and then it kind of acts as like a free motion sewing machine. And I'm just kind of going up and down, back and forth, almost like mowing the lawn. And this is making it so I didn't have to spend all those hours tacking down the entire surface, that I could just run it through my machine. This works great if you're doing something really big and something that has a pretty basic design like a color wheel. If I were doing something with a more intricate design like a Starry Night or the Scream dress that I did, it might mess up the design. I could do it just to kind of tack things down and then go back with my smaller tool to get the finer details. So yeah, there you have it. This part made my life so much easier. And here I am going super fast right through the machine. I did end up breaking a couple of the needles on the machine because I pulled it too quickly. So I will have to find a way to find replacements and figure out how to replace the needles. But otherwise, I'm really happy with this machine. I love having it to be able to do large projects like this. Thank you so much for letting me share the process of this jacket. Any kind of thrift store coat would do, and I hope that you'll give this a shot. It was so much fun to make, even more fun to wear. Thanks, guys.